Okay. So, guys, I'm gonna start the broch. I just want Kevin to get a kippah.
Okay, James, before you go on, Rabbi Lappin has COVID-19. I don't know if you know him.
I do.
Yeah,
okay, maybe like to do
sorry about that.
I mean, I don't know what his Hebrew name is, but maybe we can do a dedication for him.
I know Rabbi Lappin well. Marco, I don't know if you know, he was the previous rabbi of
no.
Keter Torah. Lovely person.
He's doing well, by the way. He's okay.
Okay, but you know what? I just wish him refuah. And if we do the shira in his merit, in the merit of this, that he has a good health. All right.
Yeah.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher kiddushanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu l'sukkot divrei Torah. Barev na Adonai Eloheinu divrei Toracha b'finu b'fiyamcha Beit Yisrael. V'niyeh anachnu v'tzeitzeinu v'tzeitzeimcha Beit Yisrael. Kulanu yodea shemecha v'lomdei Toratecha lishma. Baruch atah Adonai melamed Torah l'amo Yisrael. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher b'chabanu mikol hamim v'natan lanu Torato. Baruch atah Adonai noten Torah.
Amen.
Amen. Amen. All right. So I just want to get through this quickly for you guys. Now, I just wanted to let you know who actually Sumchus is. Sumchus, remember I said to you that there were 5 generations of Tanoim. So Sumchus is actually Sumechus ben Yosef, and he was Romanized as Sumchus. He was known like colloquially as Sumchus. He was a Jewish Tanna sage of the 5th generation. Okay, so I didn't know which generation, it's the 5th generation, and Rabbi Meir was his main teacher. And yeah, so I thought I'd let you know that. Now we're going to have an argument that's discussed between Rabba and Rava. So the main spelling of their name differences is Rabba is Reish Bet Hey, and Rava is Reish Bet Aleph. Now, Rabba was Rava's teacher. That's something that you're going to have to bear in mind for this particular part of the brisa that will come up towards 17b5. So as long as you understand the relationship that Rava is the student of Rabba. Okay.
Yeah.
All right, good. So let's just get started. So I just wanted to give you a minute summary, and then basically we're done. All right, so basically Rava brought the following case of Soros. Now, if you must remember, there are different ways to read the levels of the Gemara. I'm just reading it at its basic level because of my lack of experience. I'm not a Tana and a Moira, etc. Speaking of an Amoira, basically Rava is an Amoira. He's not a Tana. So Sumchus is obviously at a higher level, just so you guys know. Rabba and Rava. So he was quoted in total about 5 times in the Gemara, but you can't say that because he's quoted less than Rabba and Rava that he's less important. It's just that for them, they had more questions than he did. So sometimes if he asked less questions, it's not that he knew less, it's that he has with what less to ask. Okay, just so you know. It's not about how often you get mentioned, it's about what the level is.
That applies to me too.
Me too. So, just quickly a statement by Rava, just in summary. Rava said whatever type of contact makes an object tameh in the case of a zav. In the case of damages, it makes the animal's owner liable to pay full damages. Whatever type of contact leaves an object tahor, in the case of zav, in the case of damages, makes the object owner liable to pay only half damage. So what did we learn? Then we're saying, hang on a second, if the animal touches it directly, that would be muad, full payment damages for breakages. And if it was like a zav would pick up an object, that would become tameh, or tuma, and that would be thrown, and knock another object to push it out of the way, that object is still tahor pure. So we learn with sroros, if it's indirect, in a simple manner, direct is muad from the animal's body weight or their leg, and indirect is sroros. Okay.
Damon, sorry, can I just ask you a quick question on
Yeah.
that?
Yeah.
The thing with this Zav,
Yeah.
if a Zav, someone who has had a Zav emission touches something, aren't they damaging and can't they be liable for more damages?
Okay.
Or
So
not? Does it not apply?
That's the interesting point, is that I was trying to work out what it's trying to say here. Is that person liable for damaging the food? Because we learned, remember, according to Rav Chia and Rav Oshia, there's something called damages that are undiscernible. That's what Kevin's mentioning, it's discernible. So that's what confused me about the whole thing, is that obviously when you're reading it on a deeper level, it's coming to teach other things. But because it's going to open up, a Pandora's box for us and make it so complicated that we don't even understand what we're learning on a literal basis. I think because this is out of my pay grade, I would rather just learn, even like the way Rabbi Cohen gave it over in the Dafshir, as the superficial meaning. Meaning, I'm sure it comes to teach about discernible and non-discernible differences for people that are learning on that layer. But for us now, just know that direct contact by the animal's body, that weight causes breakage, is full payment, and where it's indirect force, it's half payment. So let's just rather learn it like that, because then we're not going to get distracted. And that is a sufficient way to learn it to start with. And then it said, no, well, did we come to learn the laws of Troros? And he said, no, Rav is also teaching us, in addition to that, the rules of a wagon. So what is a wagon? A wagon is an extension of the animal. So if a wagon's wheel drives over a utensil, that's like muad. It's full payment damages, as if the animal stood on it by its body weight, because it's strapped to the animal and moves with the animal. So that is full payment. If a pebble flew from outside the wheel of a wagon, but it was drawn by the animal, that's like the halacha of troros, which is half payment damages. And I think if we can come to that conclusion now of understanding how it relates to the wagon, we'd probably be safe in terms of the literal interpretation. Are you guys happy with that for starters? Kevin, you're right about the deepness. I'm just trying to grapple with this part first.
Okay, okay.
But at least Kevin picked up on that argument of Rav Chia and Rav Oshaya. Does that make sense? So that's where Chazorah is so handy, is that we recently did that daf. Do you remember, guys? And if we didn't recently do that daf, he wouldn't have kept it in mind. Okay, Stephen's coming on now. So
because it is actually, Damon,
yeah.
if it's soiling or spoiling something, if it makes things tame, it is actually damaging it.
It is. It's what you call non-discernible.
Even though it's
damage.
not tangible, you don't see it. You know what I mean?
That's what Rav Chia was talking about non-discernible damage. You are 100% correct. 100% correct. Hi, Steve.
Morning. How are you doing? You're right.
Good. You didn't miss anything yet. We just did a quick summary of yesterday. So we're going to get started now with the new issue. And we're talking about, there's a new Bryson. So all we finished off, Stephen, is on a sentence and saying that if a wagon that's attached to an animal drives over a utensil, it's full damages. And if a stone picked up from the wheel of a wagon drawn by an animal, it's half damages like Troros. Okay, Steve, I'm assuming you're in your car and you're there. You can hear me, even though I can't see you. So I'm going to carry on.
Yes, sorry. I came with you.
No reason to apologize. Let me just continue. Okay, let me
just come in the room. It's going to be something else.
All right, guys, for the sake of this, I'm muting you all. If you have an individual question, kindly unmute yourselves. I'll be willing to answer. Let's just go through the daf quickly. Right. So we. Stephen. All right. So we're going through the new Brisa, and we're going to see how this is related. Now, guys, it took me a while to see what the link was of this new Brisa, because sometimes what happens is there's Brisas that are brought forward and you don't really understand the context, or I don't understand the context, and you have to read it many, many times to understand that there's a link. So I've learned something here. I've just worked something out. there are two different types of examples of troros. Let me explain to you what they are. And I had to read to 18 to work it out. Number one, it's troros, a direct law from Moshe from Har Sinai. And that law is that if pebbles are shot from the animal's feet, and then from that case, hit a utensil and breaks it in the private domain. Remember, regular you don't pay for in the public domain. It's exempt in the public domain. The same with troros. But the classic case of pebbles, horse walks, gallops, shoots out and hits the window of a private house. You pay for that. Done. That's the classic case. Then we go to the next case. We talk now about a second level. What's it? That a wagon, which is an extension of an animal drawing it, shoots out a pebble, you pay for half damages. And then we learn about full damages for a wheel. That's the second case of troros. Now there's a third case of troros, and it's called the force by one's force. And we're going to also learn how Sumchus deals with this. So this is the object. A chicken knocks a object. How do we put it like knocks an object, and the shard of that object breaks another object. Okay. Now, what does this mean? This means that the force that came directly from an animal or that which is tied to an animal doesn't break the object. It's the force of the force. So in other words, the utensil which the animal landed on, a piece of that shatters out and breaks another object. So that's what you call a second degree force. I don't know if I'm making sense to you guys. What a second degree force is by definition. Guys, Michael.
Say it again, please.
Sure. So the first one is a direct force from the animal. In other words, an animal or that which is attached to an animal is a wagon. Stone flies off and it hits a utensil and breaks it. That's what you call a first force, a primary force. A secondary force is when that object that gets knocked by an animal. Okay, now we're not talking about an object that's attached to the animal. We're talking about now something separate, where an animal physically, like an elephant, stands on a utensil, and that shatters, and a shard of that goes and perforates and smashes a second utensil. Now that's indirect in the sense that it's not part of the animal, an extension or wagon, getting damaged and damaging another object. So obviously for the primary utensil, that's muad. For the secondary utensil that it breaks, because the shard shattered from the first utensil and perforated a second utensil, it's troros. So now we're learning extensions of troros. Firstly, by a wagon attached to an animal, that's still troros. We needed to know that. Now we're saying that if something was attached to the animal or the animal itself shattered an object and that shard went into another object, it's muad for the first object that it directly crushed, and then a force of a force, which is still half payment damages for troros. Does that make sense, guys, what we're going to be learning now? We're learning.
I just want to ask you something.
Yeah.
Can I ask you a question? Sorry.
Yeah.
The first one, the last two I understand. The first one, you made mention of a horse who kicks up pebbles and breaks a private house.
That's the case.
But that's Soros. That should be half payment. I mean,
no, you're not.
That's from outside.
Let me try it again. That is the classic case of Troros from Moshe and Hosina. We learned that in the third daf. So that's a case where the animal's galloping and a stone leaves its foot, and that direct force goes through somebody's window. You're absolutely correct. That's half payment damages. We're not saying that it's not.
Okay, no. So that never came across clearly. That's fine. Okay, perfect.
No. You're absolutely correct. That is half payment. But what we say is, how do we know that something not analogous to that exact case is also half payment damages? So, for example, if a horse is dragging a wagon, like in the old westerns, and could you say that that wagon has anything to do with the horse? If the stone flies off for the wagon. So we say, yes, it's also a case of troros. So that's what you call a extension example of a troros. Then we learn a third case now, which we're about to learn with the chickens and the rope. In what case is that? When you have, for example, an elephant that stands on an object, it doesn't kick it up, but the shard of that is that object breaks, which is more at full payment because it's the force of the animal's body or leg, and that shard hits a secondary object and shatters that. At that point, we are learning that that is also tzoros. So we're learning different examples in the next daf to tzoros. So that's one step removed because it's a force of a force. It's not the animal kicking the utensil towards another utensil. It's a shattering, it's a sharding. Okay? And what are we going to learn with the chickens is that we're learning a case of now what is considered muad and tzoros. So in this particular case, we're learning about, for example, chickens that pecked at a rope and then the object falls. So do we learn that it's muad because it's at the point where the chickens peck at the rope? Or do we say it's once the bucket smashed on the floor, which is indirect force, and therefore, because we use Marco that example of the zav again, indirect contact, that would be a case of half damages. So we needed to know the zav example to know what would be considered half payment damages or full payment damages. So we say, is it at the point where the hens peck at the rope, or is it at the point where the bucket to which the rope is attached shattered? Because if it's at the point of inception, that's muad, full payment damages. It might have happened to crash afterwards, but that's where the damage started. Or is it a case of tzoros once the bucket lands and shatters from that point? So we're learning where do we calculate the point of muad damage for direct contact versus indirect. Because it's not again the force of the animal that we're going to be discussing in certain cases. It's the ramifications of that force. All right, so let me use this example and I'll explain on. I hope I've explained these concepts relatively well. Yeah, because the thing of it is that it keeps just bringing these brices across. So when it keeps bringing these brices across, we don't know what's going on. So I had to just get a bit of an understanding. All right. So continuing its discussion of tzoros, the Gemara introduces another brisa. The rabbis taught in the brisa if chickens were pecking at the rope of a bucket and the rope snapped and the bucket broke, the owner of the chickens pays full damages. And Gavin quite rightly said that this seems like a case of tzoros because it only shatters on impact, which is almost what you call indirect damage. So we're saying we're going to see now. Rava inquired. Now, Rava is coming actually to pose another part of a brisa to illustrate this brisa. So Rava said, if an animal stepped on a utensil and didn't break it immediately, and it rolled to another place where it broke on impact, what is the law? So do I follow the start of the process that breaks the utensil, and it's thus the animal's body that is broken, the utensil directly? Or perhaps I follow the actual breaking of the utensil, and then it's a case of tzoros. Okay. So what are we trying to say here in simple English? So essentially, Rava's question is whether we view the utensil as broken. As soon as it's set in motion, as soon as the whole process, in other words, the catalyst is the hens pecking at the rope, and that culminates in its breakage, or do we not consider the utensil broken until it actually breaks? This is the way the Rosh words it. So if the utensil is considered broken as soon as it's set in motion, that culminates with its breakage, then it's deemed broken from the moment it's struck by the animal's foot. And thus, the animal broke it directly with her body, which would be a case of full damages. If, however, we do not consider the utensil broken until it actually breaks, then the animal has not broken the utensil directly with her body, but has simply initiated a force that breaks the utensil when it's no longer in contact with her body. So then this is a case of tzoros, which the owner pays half damages. And the case of the chicken, where it says the owner of the chickens pay full damages, we're going to see which view it's going to go according to. Any questions, guys, before I go on? It should be fairly clear.
No.
Okay.
Yeah, not yet.
Okay, good. Arthur, at least you're awake. It's not 100% clear yet. That's exactly the point. But at least you understand the parameters at which it's working it out. Okay. Now, so the Gemara puts a proposal together and says, like, maybe we can resolve this inquiry from the following ruling of Rabbah. For Rabbah said, if one threw a utensil off the top of a roof, and someone else came along and shattered the utensil in midair with a stick, he, the one who wielded the stick, is not liable for the utensil, because we say to him he has merely broken utensil. So this is what we say. Okay. So I'm on Michael's. Let me just put it like this. Let's take Arthur. Arthur's in an apartment in Renana. So Arthur's on the 3rd or the 4th floor, whatever, and I decide that I wanted to play around with this vase that has petunias, or vase as we say in South Africa, that has petunias. And I knocked this thing off the wall from the 3rd floor. Now, on the way that it's going to crash down, Kevin, who happens to be visiting in Renana for that time, sees the object halfway down and decides he's going to test his skills with the stone. And halfway in midair, Kevin picks up the stone and throws it and manages to have perfect aim and hits the object midair, okay, and shatters it. Now, Arthur says to me, he said, Damon, that's a Ming vase. It's a limited edition vase. You owe me for the vase. And I turn around and I'll say, Kevin owes you for the vase because Kevin damaged it mid-air. Right? Now, Kevin halachically is not responsible because what the case of it is here is Kevin merely damaged a already broken object. How do we say that it's an already broken object? Well, if it's a thin ceramic or porcelain vessel and it's going to hit on the 4th floor of concrete, it's likely, if we say that more than 9 amas would kill a person, it's likely at the 3rd or 4th floor, which is definitely more than 9 amas, the ceramic is not going to survive this. And therefore, Kevin throwing the stone halfway through in midair never broke the object. He broke what you call a broken object. Therefore, I'm responsible for pushing it off the ledge, not Kevin. So in this case, what is this question that Rabbah is talking about, who's the teacher of Rav? He's saying we work out the damage from the point of where the damage was caused. So it's not Soros in this case, where it was the indirect force that shattered the object. From the point at which you pushed it off, that's the point at which your hand had a bodily contact and caused and set in motion a set of sequences that allowed the vessel to shatter. And the halakha supports it to prove that if Kevin broke a broken object, that he's not liable because it would have shattered on the floor. And this proves that it was the setting inside setting of the motion that caused this object to break. Therefore, it's muad and not soros. Does everybody understand this?
Yeah.
Yes, I do. One quick question, Dams.
Yes.
If you're talking about a Ming vase being very thin, but let's say you said the chicken was pecking at the rope, and it takes quite a lot of pecking to get through the rope. You know, it's not like something that you just like you peck once and it breaks. When would that start, or are you going to get to that?
No, I'm going to get to it, but I'm pleased you've done your homework. Arthur, I'm pleased you've started to read because I know you've done your homework. This is how I know if Arthur's done his homework or not. So Arthur's actually read and he understood that it's going to get more complicated. So Arthur, well done. But at least I know you do your work. But as long as you understand each step of the argument, then we can have a discussion on finer points. Now, Rabbah was Rabbah's teacher, and he came to explain to his student this case of the rolling barrel with this example. Does that make sense? All right, so we're going to go on to the page of 17b5, and we say as follows. This ruling of Rabbah shows that we consider the utensil broken from the start of the process. Why then did Rabbah not resolve his inquiry on the basis of Rabbah's clear ruling in the matter? So one of the reasons it's asking is Rabbah wasn't just another source. That was actually Rabbah's teacher. So because it was Rabbah's teacher, we're saying it's peculiar that we don't understand today why he was still unsure about the matter. But as long as the student never is disrespectful to his teacher, but says, listen, I don't understand because there's another point of view, and this is what I'm grappling with you, it's fully okay to ask any questions from a student to a teacher, or just say, listen, I'm battling with this particular issue. So the Gemara now answers as follows. To Rabbah, it's clear that we follow the start of the process, but to Rabbah, it remains uncertain whether we follow the start of the process or the end of the process. Okay? So the Gemara seeks to resolve Rabbah's inquiry. Come learn a proof from the following brisa. Hopping is not considered mu'at for a chicken. Some say, however, that this is considered mu'at. The Gemara analyzes this brisa. Can you think that the brisa refers to a simple case of hopping? Certainly all must agree that it's normal for a chicken to hop. So what it's saying with this new brisa, because now what the Gemara is trying to do is bring up one or two brisas to back up Rabbah's concern. Does that make sense? It's a case for it. And it's saying, okay, so it's bringing a different brisa saying that if a chicken is hopping and a utensil is damaged, some say it's mu'at, some say it's not. So now we want to understand this brisa. To us, it seems clear that it's mu'at because a chicken that walks or hops, it's natural for a chicken to walk or hop, and therefore if it smashes an object by its direct force of its body, like a zav, would infect an object. It's considered mu'at. If it's indirect from the wind of its wings, or for example, it kicked up pebbles as it was hopping, that would be a case of choros. So we're trying to say that we're trying to work out this brisa, and maybe it might clear up Rabbah's brisa. Okay? Certainly all must agree it's normal for a chicken to hop. We're saying in a case where there's bodily contact. Rather, it must be that the brisa refers to where the chicken was hopping, and it sent the utensil flying, which then shattered when it struck the ground. And the Tanaim of the brisa, argue about the following. One master, some say, holds that we work from the starting of the process, whereas the other master, the Bava Kamma, holds that we follow the actual breaking of the utensil. Accordingly, the matter which Rabbah inquired would in fact be a Tanaic dispute. So what are we saying? Both Rabbah and Rabbah are Amoraim, okay? And because they're Amoraim, they have to defer to a Tana, which is a earlier generation for the halachic opinion. So we're saying maybe this discussion of Rabbah and Rava is mimicking an early Tanaic discussion. And let's try and see if this is example where they're talking about a chicken that when it knocked one object into another, the start of the process is what's considered the damage, which would be mu'at because the animal had bodily contact with the first utensil, or the fact that that object went into another object and created a second force damage, of which it would be tzoros. Does that make sense? So we're saying, is it the start of the process or the fact that the end result is where we determine if it's mu'at or tzoros? Okay, so we're going to see now. And the Gemara replies, no, this isn't actually what we're discussing. So what we're going to do here is it might be that the brisa refers to where the chicken was hopping and sent pebbles flying into the utensil, and it is a matter of dispute between Sumchus and the rabbis that the Tanaim of the brisa argue as well. So what it's saying here is that we're going back to this issue of Sumkus and the rabbis. So we're saying, hang on, maybe it's not talking about a case initially where it is Shoros, but like, for example, if an animal used its weight and it never broke, remember, it's a clear case of muad. If an animal landed on it and it broke at that point, that's a clear case. There's nothing to discuss. We're talking about where an animal pushed it and then it rolled and then it shattered against the wall. So that's a case of, we don't know if that case is muad or shoros. In other words, when the animal first touched it and that bodily touching is considered muad, full payment damages, or shoros because it shattered against the wall. We're not talking where an animal lands and breaks it right away. That's not even a question. So then what we're saying is here is that maybe this is, the Gemara doesn't seem to be implying this case with the brisa. It seems to be implying a case where a chicken was hopping around and pebbles shattered a utensil, and based on this comes up again with the case of Sumchus and the rabbi. So this is the classic case of Shoros. So then they're saying, all right, so scratch that brisa. We've looked at it more in depth. It doesn't seem to be that brisa. So what the Gemara actually does as an argument is it brings different similar cases and says, all right, let's examine it more carefully. Okay, that's close. Let's use that. No, that's not close. Let's dispense of it. Does that make sense, guys? So that's how it works, because it has to be consistent with every brisa and make sense. All right. So now the Gemara seeks another way to resolve Rava's inquiry. Come learn a proof from the brisa. If chickens were pecking at the rope of a bucket and the rope snapped and the bucket broke, they, the owner of the chickens, pay full damages. Learn from this that we follow the start of the process. The Gemara replies, interpret the full damages mentioned in the brisa as referring specifically to the rope. So the Gemara wants to propose, as Arthur said, that's how Arthur's done his homework, that maybe it's considering muad for the rope, because that's where direct pecking and damage took place. Does that make sense? And then the bucket might be a case of shoros, but when it says that the owner of the chickens pays full damage, it might be talking about the rope and not the bucket. Clear? Anybody unclear? So it's proposing that. Fine. But the chicken's damage to the rope is unusual and the owner should only pay half. So what it's saying is here is that why would chickens just poke at a rope? That's what Arthur's saying. It has to poke for a long time unless the rope was frayed. So there's two possible reasons. The rope is frayed and it takes one or two peckings and the rope snaps, at which case, the owner, what's he doing lifting up a bucket with a half frayed rope? But then they're saying if chickens are gunning for this rope and they peck it until it's decimated, this is keren. It's unusual damage. And because it's unusual damage, there's half payment damages for that. And we're saying, no, it's not that sort of rope. It's a rope where there's something on the rope that's attractive to the chickens, like dough. So, for example, what would happen then is you would put yeast and dough together and let it rise, and then you'd lift it up. And then the rope, the bread would have, in its raw dough state, risen. And at that particular stage, you're ready to knead the dough and put it in the oven. So if the rope had some of that dough on, etc., it would be attractive for the birds to peck at it or to try and peck at it. So we're saying it's not unusual damage. So the Gemara answers, no, it's not a case of keren. The brisa refers to where the rope is sullied with dough. So the brisa states that the bucket broke, implying that the brisa's ruling applies to the bucket as well. How then can you say the brisa's ruling refers to full damages when what you said is only in regard to the rope? So it's saying, look, the Gemara concedes the point and must therefore attack the proof of the brisa differently. Rather, we can say that the brisa's ruling of full damages for the bucket does not resolve Rava's inquiry, because the brisa might be authored by Sumkus who say that for us, one pays for full damages. So we're going to end off on